Hey, welcome back to Carly Stevens Books. Today I'm going to share with you one of the easiest ways to make your setting, your world, completely come alive to the reader. So it comes down to one word, imagery, but the problem is that hardly anybody actually defines imagery these days. They just say, oh, what great imagery, to mean basically nothing. And so I want to define what that is for you, give you some examples of how awesome it can be, and some tips for how to integrate it into your own writing. So if you have a scene that feels kind of flat, or like there's just not a lot of life in the world that you've created, around the characters, maybe it feels like they're talking heads in a white room, then this is a way just to immerse your reader into the place where everything is happening. So first of all, imagery is just sensory description. So that can be visual description, that can be the sense of touch or hearing or smell or taste, but it's literally one of those five senses that you are explicitly I don't know, stimulating feels kind of like an odd word to use, but I'm going to use it anyway, to evoke this sense of where you are. So once you describe those senses, then the reader can feel and see and hear what it's like to be in that environment. So double check some of those blander feeling scenes and see what senses have you described in a vivid way. So here are some examples of really effective imagery in a variety of different books. All right, so I'm going to start with, based on the banners back there, no one will be surprised, Lord of the Rings. There is a lot of really beautiful imagery here. So I just chose a page essentially at random, and this is from the chapter Fog on the Barrow Downs from the Fellowship of the Ring, the first section. So it says this: Soon they were leading their ponies in single file over the rim and down the long northward slope of the hill down into a foggy sea. As they went down, the mist became colder and damper, and their hair hung lank and dripping on their foreheads. When they reached the bottom, it was so cold that they halted and got out cloaks and hoods, which soon became bedewed with gray drops. Okay, now this is great. It doesn't spend a huge amount of time talking about what things look like and what things felt like necessarily, but we get a couple of sentences where it is really vivid what they're feeling. We all know what it's like to have those cold gray drops dripping down our faces when it's that foggy and misty outside. So you have the sense of touch here that is evoked really strongly, and you also have the sense of sight down into a foggy sea, which is an analogy, yes, but one that is not so theoretical that you're kind of way out in La La Land over here. Instead, you can visualize a foggy sea, and that just helps us to see what's going on. So that is the Lord of the Rings example. Another great example of imagery in general is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. She uses a ton of imagery to put you into this mystical circus. So one of the things that I like the most is the use of smell, and a lot of times people forget the use of smell, but that is, as a lot of research has shown, one of the most intense senses in terms of memory and just placing somebody in a place, maybe from their past, just in one moment. So in the very first chapter of The Night Circus, it says, "The circus looks abandoned and empty, but you think perhaps you can smell caramel wafting through the evening breeze beneath the crisp scent of the autumn leaves." Okay, so I want to make something clear here. The caramel smell wafting through the evening breeze, the scent of the autumn leaves, that is imagery using the sense of smell. Saying the circus looked abandoned and empty is not really imagery because it's just a general description. You still don't really know what you're looking at. Sure, it can set the scene, but I just want to differentiate. Sometimes people will misuse the term imagery, and what I'm talking about is that really vivid sense, whatever sense you're talking about. So isn't that nice? Makes me want the fall. Okay, another example is from Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. First chapter, the very first sentence goes like this: The morning burned so August hot, the marsh's moist breath hung the oaks and pines with fog. Okay, we have some really nice stuff here. We have the heat, it burns August hot, and you can feel the moisture in the air. We have Marsh's moist breath. So we have this sense of feeling, touch, and then the moist breath of the marsh hung the oaks and pines with fog. So another foggy description, kind of like Lord of the Rings. But you can feel and see what's going on, not in this case chilly and damp, but instead we have this just oppressive marsh heat, which is lovely. So just a couple more examples because that's how I roll. One from Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. If you haven't read Wind in the Willows, what are you doing? Read Wind in the Willows. It is surprisingly, utterly delightful. In the very first chapter of this book, we have the character named Mole, who is just the cutest, seeing a river and being utterly enchanted by it, and we get some lovely imagery around the river. So it says this: never in his life had he seen a river before. This sleek, sinuous, full-bodied animal, chasing and chuckling, gripping things with a gurgle and leaving them with a laugh, to fling itself on fresh playmates that shook themselves free and were caught and held again. All was a shake and a shiver, glints and gleams and sparkles, rustle and swirl, chatter and bubble. That last part there, all was a shake and a shiver, sparkles, rustle, swirl. We get visual, there's all that sparkling, that movement, and you also get sound as well. There's a chatter, bubble, rustle. So a couple of very strong senses evoked here with the Riverbank chapter of The Wind in the Willows. And then last but not least, we have Mossflower by Brian Jacques. If you have read any of the Redwall books, then you probably remember the feasts that these characters, these mice and weasels and moles and everything would have, because they sound so good. And you're immediately put into the situation because you can taste the incredible food that is being brought out. So here, this is in the middle of Mossflower, one of the OG Redwall books. And it says this: after all, who could resist roast chestnuts served in cream and honey, or clover oatcakes dipped in hot red currant sauce, celery and herb cheese on acorn bread with chopped radishes, or a huge home-baked seed and sweet barley cake with mint icing, all washed down with either October ale, pear cordial, strawberry juice, or good fresh milk. I mean, I would go to that feast. I would go to that feast. It sounds so good. Okay, so how can you use imagery to your advantage? A few recommendations here. One, use fresh, vivid descriptions. Try not to repeat what you've seen a million times. The babbling brook. No, people are just going to read right over that and not really think about what it means to babble. So try to think of a fresh way to just describe this sense, whether that's sight or smell or whatever, that the character is experiencing. And then another one, we saw this with Tolkien and possibly some of the others. I would have to take another look. But analogies that allow us to see or allow us to hear. Rather than something that is abstract. Keep it fairly concrete. A foggy sea. Yes, it's an analogy. It's not actually a sea, but it gives us a perfect visual of that bank of fog down below in the Barrow Downs. And then finally, a lot of people don't think of this as imagery, but it definitely counts, is strong, active words. Words themselves can evoke one of these things. So, for example, onomatopoeia, which you saw in the Wind in the Willows example, onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like what it means. So, squelch or bam or chatter or things like that. They sound like what they mean. So that in itself is imagery because you're hearing it, right? Or active verbs. So if you have an active verb that's describing what somebody is seeing or what somebody is feeling, then that can be a shorthand way to get that vividly across without stopping and spending time on this lengthy description. So I hope this was helpful. It's a simple thing. Anybody can do it, but it is sometimes overlooked, and you'll be amazed at how much more invested your readers are in the world when you give them more imagery to immerse themselves in. All right, that's it. Like this video if you like it. Make sure to subscribe for more writing, publishing, and indie author life stuff, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.